My name's Lucas, and for as long as I can remember, I've tried to be a good person, doing the right thing, keeping my head down, and facing life as best as I could. But if I'm being honest, life hasn't exactly played fair. Now in my late 30s, it feels like I've spent most of those years just trying to survive. I've lost people I cared about, made sacrifices that went unnoticed, and worked jobs that drained every ounce of energy from me, just to make ends meet. Somewhere along the way, I started questioning if there was even a purpose to all of it. I didn't stop believing in God entirely, but I did lose faith that He might actually be paying attention to someone like me. Most days felt the same. The alarm would blare, I'd drag myself out of bed, and get ready for another monotonous day. My job, managing the office at a small company. It was the kind of place people only showed up to because they had to, and I was no different. My boss was demanding, the deadlines relentless, and no matter how much I gave, it never seemed to be enough. Evenings weren't much better. I'd come home to my quiet little apartment, where the silence felt louder than anything. Most nights, I'd scroll endlessly on my phone or channel surf, just trying to escape the emptiness. I didn't talk about it with anyone. Who would want to hear me say I felt stuck in a life that didn't feel like mine? Everyone has their own problems. Why burden them with mine? Physically, I wasn't doing great either. I've never been the healthiest guy, but the stress of work and life seemed to weigh heavier with each passing day. Random chest pains became a regular occurrence, but I brushed them off as just stress. I always told myself, nothing to worry about. Then one night, everything changed. It was late, and I was still at the office, struggling to finish a project my boss had dropped on my desk at the last minute. By the time I left, it was dark, and I was completely drained. Driving home, all I could think about was collapsing into bed and shutting out the world. But as I drove, a tightness started in my chest. At first, I thought it was another stress episode. I tried to ignore it, hoping it would pass, but the pain only got worse, like someone squeezing my chest tighter and tighter. My hands started shaking, my vision blurred, and I knew something was seriously wrong. I wanted to pull over, but it was too late. The pain was overwhelming, and everything started to fade. The last thing I remember was the car swerving off the road, then nothing. I thought that was the end, but it wasn't. It was the beginning of something I could never have imagined. When I came to, or at least I thought I came to, everything felt different. I didn't recognize where I was. I felt weightless, like I was floating, and the pain that had consumed me moments before was completely gone. But so was my sense of control. Looking down, I saw the wreckage of my car resting in a ditch, and there I was, or my body at least, slumped over the steering wheel. It was surreal, like standing outside myself and watching everything happen. I could see people rushing to help, someone dialing for an ambulance, flashing red and blue lights growing brighter in the distance. But I wasn't part of it anymore. I was just there, watching. I tried to move, to reach out, to shout, but nothing worked. It was like I was a passenger, detached from everything happening below. Then everything began to shift. The scene of the crash blurred, flickering in and out like a dying TV signal. I wanted to hold on to it, anything familiar, but it was slipping away. That's when I noticed the silence. This wasn't the kind of silence you'd hear in an empty room or a quiet night. It was deeper, alive, heavy. It pressed in on me, unsettling at first, yet oddly calming, as though it was waiting for me to notice something. As I looked around, the world seemed different. It wasn't completely dark, but it wasn't light either. It felt like I was in a space that existed somewhere outside of time, neither day nor night. Shapes began to emerge, and though I couldn't fully comprehend what I was seeing, I knew one thing for certain. Shadows danced and shifted around me, yet nothing was solid or clear, As I tried to make sense of it all, a new sensation gently washed over me. It was warmth, comforting and tender, unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It started faint, like a distant whisper, but it grew stronger, reaching out to me in an embrace I couldn't explain. And then I saw it. A light. Not just any light, but something radiant and breathtaking. It was brighter than anything I could have imagined, yet it didn't hurt to look at. It wasn't harsh or blinding. It was soft, welcoming, and impossibly beautiful. It was the kind of light that made you feel safe, like no matter what had happened, everything was going to be okay. I felt drawn to it, as though it was calling my name. At first I hesitated. I didn't know what it was or where it would take me, and part of me felt afraid. But that fear melted away almost as quickly as it had come. This wasn't just a light I could see. It was something I could feel. It radiated peace, love, and a deep sense of belonging that I had never known. Slowly I moved toward it, or maybe it moved toward me. I couldn't tell. All I knew was that as the distance between us shrank, an overwhelming calm began to settle over me. The confusion, the fear, the detachment, all of it faded away, replaced by the certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be. As I approached the light, the shadows and vague shapes around me dissolved, giving way to a vast expanse of warmth and radiance. This wasn't just the absence of darkness. It was the presence of something far greater, something alive and infinite. I wanted to step fully into the light, to let it completely envelop me. But I stopped, not because I didn't want to go, but because I sensed this was just the beginning. Something was waiting for me within the light, something I couldn't yet understand. As I took one more step, the light grew even brighter, filling everything around me. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I wasn't afraid, I was in awe. This wasn't a dream, it was real. The closer I got, the more I felt the light wasn't just surrounding me, it was filling me, saturating every part of my being with warmth and peace. And then, in the light, I saw a figure. At first it was hard to make out, as though the brightness was softening to reveal him. He stood there radiant, glowing from within, yet his presence was calm, steady, and grounding. His eyes, oh, his eyes. They held a depth of love and understanding that pierced straight through me. In that gaze, it felt like he saw everything I had ever been through, every moment of pain, doubt, and struggle. And yet, there wasn't an ounce of judgment in him, only compassion. I didn't need to ask who he was, I knew. Deep down, I just knew. It was Jesus. I stood there, frozen, not out of fear, but because I didn't know what to say or do. How do you speak to someone who feels like the answer to every question you've ever had? Before I could even think, he spoke, his voice unlike anything I'd ever heard, gentle yet powerful, quiet yet resonating with a weight that made me hang on to every word. "Lucas," he said, my name sounding so familiar and tender on his lips. "You've been carrying so much for so long." Hearing those words, I felt a lump rise in my throat. He didn't need me to explain, he already knew. "I've seen your pain," he continued, his tone filled with understanding. "Your struggles, your doubts. None of it has gone unnoticed. I've been with you through it all, even when you thought you were alone." His words broke something open inside me. For so long, I had convinced myself I was on my own, that my prayers had gone unheard, that my pain didn't matter to anyone. But standing there, hearing him say those things, I realized how wrong I'd been. Tears filled my eyes, spilling over before I could stop them. "Why?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling. "Why didn't I feel you? Why didn't I know you were there?" Jesus stepped closer, his presence radiating warmth and compassion. "Sometimes," he said, The noise of the world drowns out my voice. Sometimes the pain makes it hard to see me. But I was always there, Lucas, walking beside you, waiting for you to turn to me. A wave of emotions crashed over me. Relief, guilt, gratitude, all at once. I wanted to apologize for doubting him, for turning away, for all the times I'd felt angry and lost. But before I could say a word, he smiled at me. It wasn't a smile of judgment or disappointment. It was a smile of pure love. The kind of love that says, I understand. It's okay. He reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder. The touch wasn't just physical. It reached deep into my soul, filling me with a peace and belonging I had never known. There's something you need to know, Jesus said gently, his voice carrying a weight of both mystery and promise. I looked at him, confusion flickering across my face. What do you mean? He gestured to my hands, and for the first time, I noticed something I'd never paid attention to before. On the palm of my right hand was a faint mark, shaped like an M. It wasn't new. It had been there as long as I could remember. I had always assumed it was just a crease, something insignificant. But the way Jesus looked at it, I knew it wasn't insignificant at all. This mark, he said, is no accident. It's not random. It's a sign, a reminder of the purpose I have placed within you. I stared at the mark, my thoughts racing. A purpose? Me? What could I possibly have to offer that would warrant something like this? Sensing my doubt, Jesus spoke again. Lucas, your life has meaning far beyond what you've seen so far. This mark is a symbol of the calling I have placed on you, a calling to be a light in the lives of others, to show them the love and hope that comes from me. I shook my head, overwhelmed. But I'm just... me, I said, struggling to find the right words. I've made so many mistakes. I've doubted. I've turned away. How could I possibly be someone you've called for something like this? Jesus smiled, his eyes filled with a reassurance that seemed to pour directly into my soul. It's not about being perfect, Lucas. It's about being willing. You don't need all the answers. You don't have to do it on your own. All I ask is that you trust me and take the first step. I looked down at the mark on my hand, its shape suddenly feeling heavy with significance. Something I'd always ignored, something I had never thought twice about, had now become the most important thing in my life. As if reading my thoughts, Jesus continued. This mark is a reminder, Lucas. It's a sign that you are never alone, that you are part of something far greater than yourself. The path ahead won't always be easy, but you don't have to walk it alone. I will be with you every step of the way. His words filled me with a purpose I had never felt before. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was merely surviving. I felt like I was meant for something. Jesus stepped back, his presence still radiating peace and love. There's more I need to show you, he said. As the light around us began to shift, a sense of anticipation welled up inside me. I didn't know where this journey would lead, but I was certain of one thing. My life would never be the same. The light shifted again, and suddenly it felt as if time itself had stopped. The world grew still, yet there was a sensation of movement, like I was being gently guided somewhere. Jesus stood calm and steady, his presence enough to quiet the storm of emotions swirling within me. Lucas, he said, his voice tender yet firm, the mark you carry is more than just a symbol. It's a reminder of the purpose I placed within you before you were even born. You've always carried it, even when you couldn't see it. I glanced down at my hand again, staring at the faint M etched into my skin. It looked so ordinary, so unremarkable. How could something so small mean so much? What purpose? I asked, my voice trembling. I don't understand. Jesus stepped closer, his gaze meeting mine with an intensity that made me feel as though I were the only person in the universe. Your purpose, Lucas, is to spread love, faith, and hope to others, to be a light in the darkness, to remind people of the truth, that they are seen, known, and deeply loved by me. I shook my head, the weight of his words almost too much to bear. But how? I don't know how to do that. I'm just me. His smile widened, and in that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of reassurance. You've already been living out parts of your purpose, even when you didn't realize it, he said. Let me show you. Before I could respond, the world around us transformed. It was as if an invisible screen appeared, projecting scenes from my life. The first vision was one I recognized immediately. It was from years ago, during a particularly rough time in my life. I saw myself sitting at a coffee shop, talking with a friend who had just gone through a painful breakup. I remembered that day vividly. My friend had been on the verge of tears, and I had done my best to comfort him, offering words of encouragement and reminding him he wasn't alone. As I watched the scene unfold, I noticed something I hadn't seen back then. My words didn't just bring my friend momentary relief. They sparked something deeper. It was as if a light had been reignited within him, a flicker of hope that had almost been extinguished. You didn't know it at the time, Jesus said, his voice soft, but your kindness that day planted a seed of hope in your friend's heart. That seed grew, giving him the strength to keep going. Tears welled up in my eyes as the scene faded, replaced by another. This time I saw myself at work, staying late to help a co-worker overwhelmed by a tight deadline. I had ideas. Almost forgotten about that night, but as I watched, I realized the difference it had made. My small act of support had given my co-worker the confidence to believe they could handle the challenge ahead. Jesus' voice broke through my thoughts. Even in your ordinary moments, Lucas, you've been living your purpose. You've already been a light to others, and now I'm asking you to do it with intention. The scenes faded, and the light around us grew brighter. In that moment, I didn't have all the answers, but one thing was clear. I wasn't just me. I was someone called to make a difference, and I wasn't alone. As I watched the scene unfold, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. My co-workers' shoulders relaxed, their expressions softened, and the heavy weight of their stress seemed to lift, if only for a little while. You've made more of an impact than you realize, Jesus said gently. Every time you chose kindness, every time you offered a helping hand, every time you showed love to someone who needed it, you were living out your purpose. The visions shifted, but this time they weren't as comforting. I saw moments where I'd been so consumed by my own struggles that I missed opportunities to help others. I saw a stranger on the subway, sitting alone and visibly upset, but I had been too tired to ask if they were okay. I saw a neighbor struggling with groceries, but I had hurried past, preoccupied with my own schedule. Each missed opportunity hit me like a pang in my chest, a sobering reminder of how often I'd let distractions or self-doubt keep me from doing what truly mattered. Jesus stood silently beside me, letting the weight of these moments sink in. I failed so many times. I whispered, my voice barely audible. The heaviness of regret threatened to consume me. Jesus placed a hand on my shoulder, and in an instant, the weight lifted. Lucas, he said, his tone steady yet filled with love. Your purpose isn't about being perfect, it's about being willing. You won't always get it right, and that's okay. What matters is that you keep trying, that you keep choosing love, even when it's hard. I looked down at the mark on my hand, seeing it in an entirely new way. It wasn't just a mark, it was a symbol, a reminder of something much greater than myself. "This mark has always been with you," Jesus continued, his words filled with assurance. "Even in your moments of doubt, even when you felt far from me, it was there. It's a sign that you were created for more than just existing. You were created to shine my light in the world." Tears streamed down my face as his words sank in. All the times I had felt invisible, insignificant, like my life didn't matter, none of it had been true. Here I was, standing in the presence of the one who created me, being told that my life had meaning, that I mattered. I wanted to argue, to insist I wasn't worthy of such a purpose, but the look in his eyes stopped me. There was no judgment there, no disappointment, only love, pure unconditional love. "You don't have to carry this burden alone," he said, his voice a steady balm to my doubts. "I will be with you, guiding you, strengthening you every step of the way. All you have to do is trust me." For the first time in my life I felt clarity. The doubts, the fears, the feelings of inadequacy, they were still there, but they no longer had the same power over me, because now I knew the truth. I wasn't alone. I never had been. The visions faded, and the light around us grew even warmer, as though it were pulling me closer to something greater. Jesus stood before me, his gaze unwavering yet overflowing with love. There was a new intensity in his presence, as if the weight of something important was about to be entrusted to me. "Lucas," he said, his voice calm yet resolute, "you've seen the purpose of your mark, but now you need to understand what it means for your life moving forward." I swallowed hard, a mix of emotions swirling within me, honor, fear, uncertainty, and hope, all at once. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, my voice trembling. Jesus stepped closer, and as he spoke, his words resonated deep within me, more powerful than anything I'd ever heard. "The mark on your hand is a reminder, not just for you, but for those you will meet. It is a sign of the love and hope you are meant to carry into the world. Your life has always had a purpose, Lucas, but now it's time for you to step into it fully." I felt my breath catch as his words settled over me. I thought of all the times I had questioned my worth, all the moments I had doubted my ability to make a difference. And now, here he was, entrusting me with something so much bigger than myself. "You have a mission," he continued, his voice steady, "to inspire others, to guide them toward faith and love. You don't need to have all the answers or be perfect. What matters is that you live with intention, that you choose kindness, compassion, and humility in every moment. The world is full of darkness, Lucas, but you can be a light." The weight of his words crashed over me like a wave. I'd always seen myself as ordinary, someone just trying to get by, one day at a time. But now I was being told that my life could make a difference, that I could help others find hope and faith in ways I'd never imagined. Tears welled up again as I looked at him. "What if I fail?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "What if I'm not strong enough? What if I can't live up to this?" Jesus smiled, and the warmth of that smile filled me with peace, unlike anything I'd ever known. "You don't have to be perfect, Lucas. You just have to be willing, and I will be with you every step of the way." "You're not alone, Lucas. You never were, and you never will be," Jesus said softly, his voice steady and filled with love. "I will be with you every step of the way, guiding you, strengthening you. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be willing. Trust me, and I will work through you." His words felt like a balm to a wound I hadn't even realized I was carrying. For so long, I had lived as though everything depended on me, as though I had to figure it all out on my own. But now, for the first time, I understood that I didn't have to bear the weight alone. As he spoke, the light surrounding us began to shift and swirl, alive with movement that defied explanation. Within it, faces appeared, people I didn't recognize but somehow felt deeply connected to. "These are the lives you will touch," Jesus said, gesturing toward the images. "Some of them you will meet directly. Others will feel the ripple effects of your actions. Every choice you make, every act of kindness, every moment of faith, it all matters. It all has a purpose." I gazed at the faces, each one unique yet strangely familiar. Some were smiling, others seemed burdened, but all carried a spark of something I couldn't quite put into words. "Your mission," Jesus continued, "is not just to speak words of faith, but to live them. Let your life be a testimony to my love and grace. Show others that even in their darkest moments there is hope. Let them see through you that they are never alone." The weight of what he was asking pressed down on me, not in an overwhelming way, but with a profound sense of responsibility. For so long I had searched for meaning, for a reason to keep going. And now, here it was, laid out before me. "But how do I start?" I asked, the uncertainty clear in my voice. "How will I know what to do?" Jesus reached out, placing his hand over mine. The warmth of his touch filled me with reassurance. "You start by trusting me," he said. "You start by living each day with love and intention. The path will unfold as you go, and I will be with you, guiding your steps." I nodded, a mixture of fear and determination settling within me. This wasn't going to be easy, I knew that, but it was something I couldn't turn away from. As the light around us shifted again, Jesus spoke once more, his voice carrying both urgency and hope. "Lucas, you must share what you've seen, what you've learned. There are people who need to hear your story, who need to be reminded of my love and grace. By sharing your testimony, you will plant seeds of hope and transformation in the hearts of others." The thought of sharing my story with the world was daunting. I wasn't someone who sought the spotlight or craved attention, but as I looked into his eyes, I knew this wasn't about me. It was about something far greater. "I'll try," I said, my voice steady despite the surge of emotions I felt. "I'll do whatever you ask." Jesus smiled, his presence radiating love and encouragement. "That's all I ask, Lucas. Trust me, and I will take care of the rest." The light around us grew brighter, and with it came a profound sense of peace unlike anything I had ever known. This was my mission, my purpose, and I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I wouldn't face them alone. For the first time in my life, I felt ready to become the person I was always meant to be, ready to share the truth that had been revealed to me, ready to be a light in the darkness. Then, suddenly, the peace was replaced by a sharp coldness. It was jarring, pulling me back into the physical world. I could hear muffled voices, urgent and frantic, and the steady beeping of a machine somewhere nearby. My chest ached as I struggled to open my eyes. When I finally did, fluorescent lights greeted me, harsh and blinding compared to the radiant glow I had just left behind. I blinked, disoriented, as the shapes of nurses moving around the room came into focus. Their voices grew clearer with each passing second. "Lucas, can you hear me?" one of them asked, leaning closer. I nodded weakly, my body heavy and unresponsive. I was in a hospital, alive, breathing, and back in the world I knew. But nothing about me felt the same. The memories of what I had just experienced were vivid, more real than the bed I was lying on. The light, Jesus, his words, the mark on my hand. It all came flooding back, overwhelming me with emotions I couldn't even begin to describe. Relief, awe, gratitude, and even fear swirled within me as I tried to process what had happened. I glanced at my right hand, half expecting the mark to glow or change. It looked the same as always, but I knew now it wasn't just a meaningless crease. It was a symbol, a reminder of the purpose I had been given, a purpose I couldn't ignore. The days that followed were a blur of recovery and reflection. Doctors came and went, marveling at how close I had been to death and calling my survival miraculous. They used words like unbelievable, but none of them could have grasped the truth of what I had experienced. When I was finally strong enough to leave the hospital, the real challenge began. How was I supposed to return to my life after an experience like that? How could I go back to the mundane routines when I had been entrusted with a mission that felt so much greater than anything I had ever imagined? At first, I kept the experience to myself. I wasn't sure how to talk about it, or even who to tell. Every time I thought about sharing it, doubt crept in. Would anyone believe me? Would they think I was crazy? But the memory of what Jesus had told me, the mission he had given me, was impossible to ignore. I knew I couldn't stay silent. The first person I told was my best friend, Mark. We were sitting in my living room, and I could sense his hesitation, as if he wanted to ask about my near-death experience, but didn't know how to start. Finally, I decided to break the silence. "Mark," I said, "something happened to me while I was gone. Something I can't explain, but I need you to hear me out." He gave me a cautious look but nodded. "Okay, I'm listening." I took a deep breath and started from the beginning. I told him about the light, meeting Jesus, the mark on my hand, and the mission I had been given. As I spoke, I could see the skepticism in his eyes, the way he was trying to reconcile what I was saying with what he knew to be possible. When I finished, there was a long pause. Finally, he said, "I don't know, Lucas. That's a lot to take in." "I know it is," I said. "I don't expect you to understand, but I need you to know that this is real. I can't explain how or why, but it happened, and I can't ignore it." He didn't say much after that, and I could tell he was struggling to process it. I couldn't blame him. This wasn't exactly something you hear every day. Over time, I started sharing my story with more people, little by little. Some were supportive, others were skeptical, and a few outright dismissed me. But I kept going because I knew that even if just one person found hope in my story, it would be worth it. One of the most powerful moments came when I spoke to a small group at my local church. Standing in front of them, my heart pounding, I shared everything: my doubts, my struggles, and the incredible experience that had changed my life. When I finished, an older woman in the front row stood up, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for sharing this," she said. "I've been struggling with my faith for so long, and hearing your story reminded me that God hasn't forgotten about me." Her words hit me harder than anything else. In that moment, I realized what my mission was truly about. Not convincing everyone to believe me, but planting seeds of hope and faith in the hearts of those who needed it. As the weeks turned into months, I began to see the ripple effects of my testimony. People reached out to me, thanking me for sharing my story and telling me how it had impacted their lives. Some told me they had started praying again after years of feeling disconnected from their faith. Others said they had found the courage to forgive or to take steps toward healing. Through it all, I held on to the mark on my hand as a reminder of the purpose I had been given. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt and fear, times when I wondered if I was doing enough or if I was the right person for this mission. But whenever those doubts crept in, I remembered Jesus' words, "You don't have to do it alone. Trust me, and I will guide you." And so, every day, I chose to trust, to take one step at a time, to live out the purpose I had been given. I didn't have all the answers, but I didn't need to. All I needed was faith. Faith that even in my imperfection, God could use me to make a difference. Looking back now, I see how much my life has changed since that day. I'm no longer just going through the motions or questioning my worth. I wake up every morning with a